firmly believe that color, it holds connotations, it holds metaphor, it inspires memories in people or like inferences. I think that's a very underrated part of storytelling.
Hi and welcome everyone to the 8th episode of 𝐂𝐚𝐫𝐲, the way of the artist. This is Chris Saros speaking. I'm hosting this podcast together with my dear friend Adrian Baxter. And today we are super excited to have a very special guest with us, coming straight from Vancouver, Canada. She's well known for her unique work as a photographer, as well as a classical pianist and occasional model. All of those things she does on an exquisitely high level. So without further ado, let's begin. Lillian, thanks for joining us and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This is so exciting.
Yeah, we've been planning this for a while. Super happy that we finally managed to get it on. Last week we had 𝕮𝖆𝖊𝖚 from Mexico. This week we have you. We're trying to have more guests on the podcast now to shake things up a little bit, hear new opinions on things, keep things exciting and interesting. So yeah, Adrian, how are you doing tonight?
Yeah, I'm good. So these guest episodes are a perfect opportunity to look even further into someone's work than I think we're used to doing in an everyday everyday way, really. So I've been looking through Lillian's photography this afternoon and just finding something new every time. And I just want to say before I forget that I've always had an appreciation for photography that doesn't overdo it with details, but also doesn't rely on empty space too much. And I always feel like finding that balance must be tricky, but I think you've absolutely nailed it. You have details in there that can be read into, but also, it's not kind of overly crowded, and the balance is perfect.
Yeah, thank you so much. I actually, it's funny enough, whenever I'm editing or taking photos, a really big part of my process is just staring at it and staring. Just wondering, if something is too busy or, because the costumes are usually so elaborate. It's like, how distracted is the eye, So all of that balance is vital before I start anything else. So, yes.
Do you have that in mind when you are on set with your models? Or is that something, in terms of what elements go where, is that something you kind of preempt quite a lot, or do you do a lot of that afterwards, or how does that work?
It is correctable. So a lot of it, sometimes the extra musings about it would come after the shooting. But during the shooting, I really like to think in triangles a lot of the time. So I sometimes have my own sort of layouts where I like to have focus in in a canvas. And I try to sort of position the model in a way so that it does fill my camera frame in the way that I desire. So there's only so much you can do sometimes on frame. Like, mistakes will happen, but we try to be preemptive about it.
Yeah, I guess you want to kind of leave some room for like on the spot creative work as well.
Yes, exactly. And if there's something missing, if there's too much negative space later that can't be fixed, this is when the beauty of post work does come in a little bit. So we live in an age where there is some breathing room.
I was just going to pick up that point that you mentioned before about staring at your work for like an eternity, which is like a big part of the whole process. I absolutely, I think that's so funny because I've heard that from such a ton of artists, and it's the very same for me. Like when I'm working on a piece, on a 3D piece, for example, it's always like, sometimes I feel like 80% of doing the work is just staring at it from different angles. And sometimes I would stand up from my desk and take a couple of steps back and look at it from a couple of steps back and just, you know, I'm not sure, Adrian, do you do that as well?
I like to do a pirouette with my eyes closed and suddenly see what pops up. No, but I completely agree. And I do it over 1 or 2 nights sometimes, so that when I come back to it, something usually stands out to like your immediate view, something that needs adjusting. And I wonder if that's kind of similar for every kind of visual artist, just they have their own way of seeing things. But I got asked about that a while ago, and I realized that I see, like, my early sketches and things that need editing, I kind of see it in a 3D way, that anything that needs adjusting sits above anything that I'm happy keeping in. Mm-hmm. So Lillian, do you kind of, are there elements for you that maybe, do you allow some space for coming back with fresh eyes and seeing what kind of stands out or anything like that?
In a perfect world, yes. I like working like that. But obviously, you know, if someone's a paying client, you do have a turnaround. But organically, I love what I call this gestation period. Like, you know, the baby needs time to grow in the womb.
Yeah, so absolutely.
And, you know, sometimes it just needs a little bit more time. And there have been shoots where I, unfortunately for the model, but I've left and just let it sit for months and months and months, because there's always something missing and it doesn't look quite right. But almost every time after you allow yourself to figure it out eventually, it's almost always worth it. So in a perfect world, yes.
Yeah, different ideas need sort of their own time. Sometimes it is within the hour, sometimes it's within the month. It's got to kind of roll with it, you know?
And, you know, there are other, on the flip side, there's what I call, you know, divine madness a little bit, where you're channeling something from somewhere beyond yourself and it just comes instantly. And there is no need for humming and humming and staring. And it's just it is such a flow. But again, you can't tap into that on demand, you know, so.
Yeah, we've been talking about that quite a couple of times in the last couple of episodes. It's such an elementary thing to everything, like to all art practices, really.
So I guess your relationship with the models kind of can affect that quite a lot as well then. Like your kind of, what's the word? You're kind of, if you gel with them quite easily, then I guess that aids the creative process and allows for sort of on the spot things like that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, funny enough, a big part of my work is actually what I jokingly call human relations, because you know, you have to make them feel comfortable and confident enough to start emoting and kind of disappearing into their characters. Often, you know, if someone is self-conscious or, you know, a little bit nervous, it almost always translates onto the camera. So you have to be a good talker, so to speak, and just get them to feel at home. So ideally, you know, if you're friends with someone, it's great, but you won't necessarily take photos only of your friends, you know? So
yeah, sure.
I think it's a very important skill to have.
So talking about your costumes, like there is so many open questions to me because they're always so elaborate. I don't know, like, first of all, who pays for them?
Well, you know, this is really funny because it is a mixed bag. So, for example, if it's like a larger client, they might have a budget where we can go pull or rent or buy certain pieces that we might be missing. If it's like, you know, just artist to artist, we might collaborate on something together where I might photograph another artist or designer's pieces in an artistic way. Sometimes it's just crafted from the bottom up. Like, you know, I have a hot glue gun and I try to do things and we make it work. Obviously, it's not video, so it doesn't have to be perfect. But I think it really depends on like the project. But ultimately, if there is a budget, it's usually given by a larger client. Otherwise, it's on a smaller scale from a smaller client, or it's a labor of love between, different people. So.
Yeah, I see. I just remembered actually when you were in Switzerland and we did the recording, the piano stuff. You had like kind of what was it? Like kind of a breastplate or something with you, right? Like some knight armor piece. And honestly, I'm just trying to figure out why the hell did you have that?
You never know when you need breastplates. That's what I always say.
Honestly, I set off the screening at an airport every time because there's always so much metal in my bag. And it's usually some sort of armor. No weapons because you're not allowed to, but, like armor and stuff. And that would have been for a photo shoot. So that's why my home is full of random, strange trinkets. And looks partially like an armory. So,
yeah, that must be cool. Like having to deal with all these kind of armor pieces. That
I love the thought of. Sorry, just to interrupt. I love the thought of like when people travel and their luggage is maybe over, so they put clothes on to travel with. I imagine. I don't know if you've ever had to do that, but wearing armor onto a plane or something just because of the flight restrictions and just getting looks. I love the idea of that.
Just imagine the beeping. It's going to be a nightmare for borders security.
But like the whole armor thing, not just armor, like the whole elaborate costume is kind of a stylistical element to all your work. I'm wondering how that came about. Like, was that something that built up? Was it like a personal preference that you really went for because you just liked the aesthetics, or was it something that built up over the years, like naturally?
It's a little bit of everything. I mean, of course, it has to be personal taste too, because it would be torturous to do something you're not really inspired by.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, but I think growing up, I was very enamored with just world fairy tales and, history books and all that stuff. And then, I would be just nose in a book all day. It doesn't matter where I was, with my glasses being all geeky and stuff. And then, also with an appreciation for, nerdy things and stuff. But I don't know. I think there's an important element in folklore and in fantasy and stories and stuff that work as placeholders or reflective sort of mediums that critique our world too in a sandbox. And I think it's usually really fun to explore these ideas and archetypes and stuff. So, I mean, I found inspiration in that a lot. Certainly growing up with classical music helped with that sort of taste for things that were slightly old and stuff. So, I mean, it was a given almost. But I think there was a point where I thought about shooting more contemporary stuff, there might be more money in doing like weddings or like maybe more lifestyle fashion editorials and stuff. But I couldn't really find a narrative voice there that something fantastical would allow. And ultimately, I need freedom in my work. I tend to bend a lot of rules as a photographer. I'm sure like academic photographers would cringe if they saw how I was shooting sometimes. But, it's just, that's kind of the base, like how it started, I would say. So.
I don't want to lead the whole conversation. I have like 500 other questions, but Adrian, maybe you have something burning.
I'll be honest, I need to stop scrolling because I keep tuning out and looking at all the details. So I'm going to put your work away just for a second. No, because as you were explaining then about how you kind of grew up with the classical music and reading folklore, like that absolutely translates, but not in like a super like common way, if that sounds right. Like you've definitely got your own perspective of using your inspirations and getting your work, and I can absolutely understand why you'd never kind of fully went into the standard wedding kind of work. I think me and Chris can relate in terms of the importance of keeping your own signature within your work, even if you are working with different types of clients. Like your underlying signature always has to be there, just as part of the whole process. I think that's what's got probably all three of us there in the first place.
I would maybe agree 70% just as a side note.
So what's the 30% you wouldn't agree with?
Because sometimes I just have to do a festival poster that doesn't need to have like any kind of resemblance to my personal work or whatever, just to pay the bills, really.
Sure.
Sometimes it really is just that, but I try to only do that occasionally and not let it dominate my whole work routine.
Yeah, so, they're kind of like gap fillers.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Sometimes I just have to do stuff that isn't really up my alley 100%, but that's totally fine if it's like a small sacrifice to pay for like the greater good, so to speak.
Well, there's always lessons in those kind of gap fillers that we can bring to our main work, I think. Whether it's
sure, of course. I mean, it's not always just negative, but
no.
Obviously, as an artist, you would prefer to always work from a point of view where you lead the whole narrative and you take it into the direction that you like it to go. So yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure that's the same for you, Lillian.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty important because I don't want to necessarily always call back to something that's existing. Like, I'm not trying to reinvent like a wheel that already exists, but I can pull inspiration from it, you know? So this is why, like, some people ask me, oh, you don't shoot a lot of literal character representations in old myths and stuff. I mean, sometimes I do, but not all the time. Or people ask me, do you shoot cosplay of, existing characters and stuff?
Fair enough point, considering your love for all things nerdy.
Yeah. So, I was like, I could, but, I kind of want to make my own thing too. Like if I like something enough, maybe, but yeah, like I would never do a Boromir, for example, as a cosplay. I do my own Boromir,
Yeah, I was going to say, especially with the amount of time and effort that goes into these projects, you want to be all in on every project and not worried about kind of your end result not being quite where you want it to be.
Yeah, but I'm also so absolutely critical of myself that if one thing is off, there are days where I want to just delete my whole gallery because I'm just so it's normal, I think. It's all part of growing things. Yeah.
Yeah, so. Battling with perfectionism is, it's part of the course, unfortunately.
I think, to be honest, there would be probably something not quite right if there wouldn't be those moments. I think if no artist ever reaches the point where they could say, I don't have anything else to learn and I'm 100% happy with everything that I do. That sounds like an absolutely impossible thing to reach. So I think the self-criticism and the perfectionism surely got its downsides, but also quite a lot of upsides. And it's just a necessary part of reflection and growing, I guess.
It's just making sure it doesn't stop you, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the problem, I speak as, a classical musician as well. The fact that there is no ceiling is extremely intimidating, but it's also exciting if you're aspirational. But I mean, I'll use an example, like there's a Canadian pianist, his name is Glenn Gould. When he was young, he recorded the Bach-Goldberg variations, and then he recorded them again as a very old man, and they sound like two different people. Which one is better than the other? It's subjective, really, but you could argue that, through decades of experience, his later recordings were better, but it's all subjective because what is better, so...
That just reminded me of the last statue, the last sculpt that Michelangelo made before he died, which was extremely raw compared to the David statue, for example, or like any of his younger work, I guess, which was like the complete opposite, which was like driven by perfectionism. And then this last piece was just so extremely fragile and down to the core. like the complete opposite to what he strived to be probably as a younger artist, which is just, I find that super interesting, and there's so many different messages that one could interpret into that kind of idea.
Yeah. And, this is why I think we have to be kind to ourselves when we look at our old work. Like, there are times where I do want to just scrap it and hide it from the world. But then at that point in time, it was exactly what we thought was necessary or suitable or good. And it's a bit of a time capsule, So
yeah, that's
I try to remind myself of that. So.
Yeah, 100%. It's like, just to back up with what you said about the kind of older work, I think we've said something similar before on here, that piece in that moment, you created, whatever medium it is, you created with all the skill and tools you had to hand at that point. It'd be unfair to expect the work of your kind of future self at that point, if that doesn't sound too bizarre, because you've got that space in between where you've learned the lessons, you've improved your skills to get to that point, as you will in the next 5 to 10 years for when you look back again, type thing. And I think it could be a tricky cycle to get lost in, of like either kind of letting yourself get stuck in thinking that you are still at the same point as your old work, or even trying to replicate it because for whatever reason you feel like that was better than where you're at now. And I think it could be something quite heavy to deal with if it comes up too often. I mean, I've definitely had that in the past, of both sides, like feeling like I've not improved, but also trying to recreate something that I was happy with in the moment. But then, like you say, you kind of recognize that you're on a slightly different, or you're further maybe ahead of the path that you were back then. But yeah, just to underline the point of being kind to yourself at whatever spot you're at, I think that's really important.
Yeah, so I mean, it is absolutely just what do we have in our toolkit and how do we make the most of that? And I don't know, I often tell myself, if I start hating what I'm seeing from before, it's probably because I've gotten better. So, it's one of those double-edged indicators, and I just take it with as much grace as I can, even though it's hard sometimes. So, yeah.
I think it's just the beauty of being in the moment with your own work and relaxing into it in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think one point often gets forgotten when speaking about like comparing one's older work to, or like younger work, let's say younger, like from younger years to their older work, or like more mature work. I see it for myself as a musician. I often feel like I don't have the energy for the kind of aspirations anymore that I had like 10 years ago. And that leads to a completely different outcome of the stuff that I'm doing nowadays. And both have their ups and downs and pros and cons. And I think that's why it's important not to constantly compare, because it's two different people really doing the same thing. It's just that's a basic thing to me, almost like a fact. It's not the same person that created the stuff that I did 10 years ago, because there was so much missing, but there was also so much more energy present that I lost over the years. And yeah, I think it's a fair point to say there's no real reason to always compare your older work to what you're doing currently. It's always just a momentary point of view, really.
Yeah, it's nice to look back and kind of recognize whether it's certain projects or anything. It's nice to kind of reminisce a little bit, but if it starts getting into the area of critiquing your own work,
or comparison, because I think there is no real reason why would one compare it. Like what's the benefit in that?
And I like to joke with myself that your cells completely regenerate every 7 years. You're literally not even the same person.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Even from a physical point of view, like there's so much change, and And yeah, and also like the times we live in that are changing so drastically, so quickly. If you imagine that 10 years ago, if you would have told anyone that we can now replicate the work of master artists with one click with AI, they would have probably laughed at you. So yeah.
Replicate's a strong word.
Yeah. Sorry for that.
Imitate painfully.
I give you permission to slap me in the face.
No, it's a fair point, because I think
to imitate.
Our whys and hows change over the years, so that has to reflect in our work. Mm-hmm. It's almost impossible to not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can go on a whole thing about AI, but.
Yeah, but let's not get into that too quickly.
Yes.
Yeah, we don't really like talking about it much.
Yeah.
Yes.
it always comes up. Obviously, I mean, it's a serious topic as well. But there is so much better stuff to talk about when looking at your work, Lillian. So I'm wondering, how do you see, like, what are the differences for you within your fields of work when it comes to the dynamics? Like, do you see any differences, major differences, or like major similarities when you, maybe the wrong word, compare your work as a musician to your work as a photographer?
Yeah, I would say there is a fundamental difference. It's kind of more of just the nature of what I do, in the sense that, as a pianist, sure, I can do multiple different styles, depending on the project. But I started off, and my main bread and butter is classical. And your job as a classical musician is to be a very good interpreter of something that already exists.
Yeah.
You can be unique with it, sure, but you also need to be, like, I would say 60% historian, in the sense that you have to honor the country or the time period that it comes from in order to make it sound as much like what the composer had intended. And then everything else is like maybe appropriate stylistic choices. So there is creativity, of course, but you are using like a map that's already been drawn, essentially. And then with my photography, it's kind of nice to just create from nothing, right? Which I actually really like a lot. And so
that raises one specific question. Assuming that your classical training began much earlier, before you started doing photography work, right?
Oh, yeah.
So was the photography journey, was it kind of an, what's the right word? Kind of a rebellion against that concept of like trying to recreate and replicate and interpret work that's already been done?
I think you've actually nailed it pretty much. I would absolutely consider it a rebellion in every single way, for how I was living, but also in just the nature of how I was shooting and editing at the time. Like, I remember I started when I was maybe like seriously dug my heels in like in my early 20s. I mean, I played around as a teenager, but I didn't really do it seriously. And then when I sunk my heels in, it was just, I had almost no gear. So I had to do a lot of things my own way. Like, I've developed my own methods and stuff. And then back then, that sort of painterly, sort of manipulated image was not really as accepted. So you'd always get I'd always get naysayers and all that stuff. So it was really much like a middle finger towards most photography, panels or competitions and stuff. It was just kind of, I do my own thing. And here we are.
But also
now.
You've been extremely successful, especially when it comes to like awards and prizes. And we both saw your bio on your website today.
Oh, thanks.
So yeah, there's like an endless list of awards and mentions and stuff. Like, yeah, it's been a bit dizzying even.
Oh, thanks. I mean, it was kind of punching upwards up until a certain point. And then it just became much more common. And now it's even like an official category in a lot of, formal competitions or whatever. Not that I create work solely for competitions. I just did it before for some, just to see, right? But I think it's nice to just to see how that area, that more academic or formal world, is also reflecting trends and stuff in the real world, although they're usually 2 steps behind. I'm going to say this. Yes.
I just want to kind of pull up the point of it being like the act of rebellion against like the go-to kind of set of rules. I think any kind of creative work that takes on that mindset generally ends up standing out for positive reasons to some degree, just because, we all know there are certain kind of parameters to stick with for all these different mediums. But as soon as you can kind of use those to step out of what's expected, that's when you kind of start to find your own voice, and you get certain things kind of standing out. And I can't imagine any legitimate awards going to something that's so within the rules and so like done before and all this, unless I might be wrong. I'm sort of thinking completely open. I'm not involved in that world, but in terms of things standing out, surely they have to have that original kind of rebellion behind them.
Yeah, I would agree for sure. I like to say that in order to break the rules, you have to know what the rules are first. I tell my music students this and stuff like that. You need the foundation to be rigid, and then once you understand why XYZ is there, then you can start pulling the strings a little bit, But I think there is ultimately inherently like value in also understanding why certain rules become textbook. But if you see it all the time displayed in the same manner, it's boring, So
yeah, it's like you say, it's how you use it. Once you've learned something, it's how you use it that matters, really.
It's tools, not rules.
Oh my God.
That needs to be on a t-shirt.
Was that too cringy?
Sometimes cringe is right. Sometimes it's right,
He is right.
Yeah, but nonetheless, I think it's very true. Like, if you look at all these things, like all those rules as just mere tools that you can use however you want and however you want to break them as well to create something, whatever that might be. It's much more freeing, and it allows you to work from a much purer place, I would say, than just trying to fulfill a set of dogmas that people always have done like they are because that's the best way to do it in the textbook.
Yeah, I guess it's in like 2 camps of like someone teaching a skill and then someone giving an opinion. There's like, here's a skill, but then you're not allowed to do this. No, that's the opinion then. Just no one can tell you not allowed to do it.
I just remembered, Adrian, do you remember that story I told about when I was at art school, that photographer teacher? When he immediately put me down when I asked if we can do some more elaborate photo manipulation. So,
be creative.
I was just like, I don't know, 20-year-old Chris not being up for like changing the color of a fucking umbrella in a picture. And I thought like, there is so much cooler, more creative things to do with this stuff than changing the color of a damn umbrella. And
you wanted to put flames on it, didn't you?
Yes, I wanted to put like insane stuff in there. So I asked him like, so are we gonna do any kind of like more elaborate, more creative stuff with manipulation at some point? And he was just like, I think he was even a bit like offended by the question, because he was this older guy, like older professional photographer who probably took like pictures of fucking products or something all day long, or like weddings or shit like that. And his answer was like, no, that's for children.
Wow.
Well, I have.
So that's what they teach you at fucking art schools.
Well, it's like, I understand, sure, he's trying to teach a lesson, etc. But, it's like, uh, first of all, if that's for children, I have some big feelings about that, which is I think there is an innate wisdom in children that you cannot.
That is very true.
There's like a whimsy in them, the way they see the world. It is electric, like, especially with the games that children used to play and stuff, their imagination. It is untainted.
It's very untainted.
Yes. And I was like, if it's childlike, that probably means it's whimsical. And that's exactly what we need, So if it's childlike, even better, like,
Yeah, it's learning to play within the work. Yeah, we spoke about it before. Keeping that element of play is so important. In however that shows up for everyone, it's kind of having that underlying current of play surely yields better results than being super strict and, quite bland about it.
Yeah. I mean, the strictness is probably just to teach you how to do a certain thing, use the camera, you understand the settings. Sure, it's an exercise, but like, at the same time, it's like, I also meet people who might be like, oh, if something's too manipulated, I refuse to call it a photograph or something.
Yeah, right.
It's like, I'm like, well, I mean, so every photograph is now retouched, so nothing is a photograph to you. Like, what is this,
And it's a shame, but I think just given, I think like you said before about the tools we have to access now, it's if you see something that's not for you, fair enough, but there's no need to kind of put it down in any way. You just kind of move on, and there'll be other people who prefer things that are touched up and a little cleaner, a little more vibrant, or anything like that. And you've got to kind of just, move on really, and not kind of take that on board too much. I think because there's always going to be something said about everything that we do in whatever way.
Yeah. I mean, there's room for everyone, I guess, when it comes to what you want to consume and what you don't want to. So,
yeah,
for sure.
Let's go to a more pragmatic question. How is your everyday routine? Like, I'm curious about how do you survive as an artist, and how much of the musicianship, how much of the musician teaching, the piano teaching is part of your week? How much is it part of your financial survival, and how much space is there for your more freeing art journeys?
Yeah, well, it's funny enough. I'm a firm believer in if you want to do something, you make time for it. But the question is energy, right? But I would say that I love the predictability of income when it comes to teaching and stuff. It's predictable and it feels safe. So
and it's like regular, like it's regular fixed income, right? That's
exactly
quite the advantage, of course.
Exactly. So I'm like, I like the peace of mind it offers. So I actually teach maybe 5 days a week now. Yeah. So I used to do a little bit more. Yeah. So I teach 5 days a week.
I thought it's way less, actually.
Oh, I teach a lot. And, in a way, it's nice to be, to have that security, of course. And then with my editing and stuff, like I might shoot a couple times a month or do a lot one month and then none the next. And then just pace my editing when I'm not teaching or stuff like that. It gets a little tiring though. So my time management isn't necessarily the best when it comes to that. But I would say the photography is pick gigs that interest me or are worth doing financially, and plan around it, and then use the piano teaching as the fundamental bone of it all.
That makes sense.
Yeah, performing doesn't render you anything, so we need to eat. So the teaching helps. So.
Do you feel like teaching and the things you've learned through teaching helps with the other kind of creative things that you do in terms of like how you deal with people?
Oh, that's an interesting one.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I teach all ages, but a lot of them are like under the age of like 18. So, teenagers and children. And especially the younger they are, like you have to really get on their level for them to like understand you. So like, you know, like obviously there's like a chain of command, so to speak, but they have to feel comfortable enough around you. And I think that when it comes to shooting, especially when working with models or clients that have never done this before, you have to learn how to relay your very intricate or distracted thoughts in a way that like a toddler would understand.
I guess it's another way of teaching, isn't it?
Yeah, and then it's just you have to you don't want to sound like you're belittling someone, but at the same time you have to word things out really clearly. And how do you streamline this idea so that everyone's on the same page and, you know, be encouraging and all that stuff. So I think it does help.
Yeah, because we've mentioned before about like how to explain your internal ideas into the outer, and it's not always easy. It's definitely a skill. Like we've learned a lot from doing these episodes in terms of like how to get thoughts across in a nice, clear way. So that's really good to know that the teaching side has helped you kind of lay out that in a really effective way. Because if you get that right, it not only benefits them, but it benefits you and the whole project as a whole.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, you know, if a kiddo knows what's going on, then you've laid it out as clearly as you could for anyone, you know. So
I just remembered that, I don't think it was it a story you told me once, or maybe it was a post on Instagram or so. I think it was a post when you said something about like in order to motivate some of your younger students, you would come up with like kind of an RPG game kind of system where when they get like this or that piece right or so, then they can upgrade their armor or something like that.
Nice.
I have done that before. And, you know, sometimes you got to pull desperate strings, you know, to get different kids motivated. Like the RPG one was for like a couple of students, my slightly older kids. I would say maybe 10 to like 12, and it worked a lot for them. And then, you know, some of my little ones, like, you know, little girls that might be like 7, you know, I'm like, oh, let's play shop. You know, if you can get some points for this and you can spend it at the shop for like stickers and stuff, right? And they like that idea of working for points, right? That's the thing. So, but the RPG thing is a little elaborate, but it was a continuous thing. So.
But it's also a really creative way of making them get into it. Like it's really cool.
You almost have to like trick them into putting the effort in and working without them realizing they're doing it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I could go the old-fashioned route and be like, well, if you don't do it, mom and dad's going to be mad and you won't pass your exam. But then, you know, it's not really fostering them loving music. I mean, unfortunately, some instances will have to be that no matter what. But you do what you can.
I have
one question. Sorry.
Sorry. You go. No, you go. I've been talking a lot. All
I keep thinking about, I'm kind of bringing up a little point from earlier, actually, that stuck in my head. In terms of like, let's say you have a fully personal piece of photography work or a project that you have either you've made time for or you have no one else included to give any kind of feedback. From the point of having like the very first idea of how it might look or where it might be set or colours or anything, how does that show up for you? Just because we've spoke about before of getting like little flashes of ideas and then we sit down and plan it out. But in terms of a photography project, a lot of the moving parts must be quite kind of maybe sometimes difficult to pull together. So how do you start a project from scratch, basically?
Yeah, I mean, it's I ask myself this question too, like how do I start? Usually like the starting point is it could be whatever I get my hands on first. So for example, let's say a designer approaches me, hey, I have this outfit, and then I'll design a project around that outfit. Or if there's a model that I want to work with, how do I envision them? Or if it's from nothing at all, I would kind of lay it out and think about what kind of story I want to tell. What do I need? And then kind of put the feelers out from there. In terms of color and stuff, that is so important and vital to me as a step. I have like, you know, palettes that I like to make and stuff. Granted, some of it requires play afterwards because I might change my mind entirely. But I firmly believe that, color, it holds connotations, it holds metaphor, it inspires like memories and stuff in people or like inferences. So I think that's a very underrated part of storytelling. So that's something I plan.
Do you ever kind of have like you kind of you lay out and your location and everything is set up, and then you try different color setups and see which one kind of resonates more, or do you generally know where you're going with colors sort of within, like, whilst you work on it?
I mean, I always kind of sort of noodle around when I'm editing, but before that, when I'm in front of the set or whatever and shooting, I try my original idea, map out what will need to be color corrected or color toned to begin with, and then make tweakments from there. I sometimes play around with different like setups or whatever, but usually I didn't. I'm just like, nah, I planned everything out with this, and it usually works. But at least I gave myself space to do it if we need to. So
let's come back to the Lord of the Rings photography. I'm sure you want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to hear this.
So, I mean, this is such a masterful composition, and the sky is absolutely mind-blowing, and the storytelling is just absolutely nailed it. How much time did you spend on that piece, like from start to finish?
Oh gosh. So that one's a bit of an outlier too. So it's actually part of a 3-part series too that I did. Let's just say that because of the lens I had at the time, and there was no way of me working around with the situation due to the space we were in, I pieced together 8 different photographs. I stitched them all together to make this one photograph. There's no way
I see.
I didn't have like a wide angle lens at the time, so it just wasn't looking right. So that took forever. Setting it up also took forever because we set it up one way, and by the time we were done, the sun moved. So we had to move it entirely altogether. And the flowers in the field and stuff, we actually manually planted into the ground.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then everything that you see there exists. I mean, a couple of the 𝕮𝖗𝖊𝖏 there were edited in as extras from other images that I took because we didn't have enough people, but most of them were in, the whole time. And everything you see, all the costuming and stuff was real. We painted the shields and everything. And then it was just our vision of what, the funeral of 𝕮𝖗𝖏𝖏 might have been like 11th or 12th century, like Western European influence and stuff. So,
is this one on your website? Yeah, I was admiring this one earlier. Yeah, the glow of that is just perfect.
Yeah,
so you've got that warm kind of like nostalgic look. Yeah, it's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
And I love how like muted the reds are as well. They're not like super in your face. It all kind of works together. I really can appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. I think my train of thought for editing in terms of colors was like, the human eye sees color differently in different light, right? So assuming that this was slightly darker with the sunset, I can't imagine the reds being too garish, right? And plus the natural fabrics were like a more natural sort of look. So yeah.
It could be straight out of the movie, really. Like it could be the movie poster.
Oh, thank you. I mean, we didn't want to, cosplay.
Yeah, of course. I get it. And it doesn't feel look like that at all. That's what I'm trying to say, maybe.
But we wanted to just do our own version. And there's like a sister to this as well. There was the rescue of Faramir that we did with the same group, actually. They didn't quite show it, I guess, in the movies, but it's when Faramir was rescued by like the 𝕮𝖏𝖏𝖏 Swan Knight, and then so we had that scene as well, and we had some Gondorian rangers in the back, the Swan Knights, and then Prince Imrahil like holding a very wounded Faramir with like a black arrow in his chest and stuff. So that was fun.
So was that a personal kind of project, or did someone kind of finance that, or kind of helped financing it for various reasons? Or because I'm always kind of a bit, I guess, ignorant to how these things work. Like maybe the same way like a non-musician wouldn't really know how the whole label stuff for musicians works and all this kind of stuff. The question is, did you just do that all on your own? And did you lead that whole project? Was it like your project, or was there someone else properly involved?
Well, the funny thing is that it is personal. Like this was like a scene I've always wanted to shoot. I had a very equal collaborative partner in this, and this was Zan from the company Felonfair. He runs this like medieval events / costuming company down in South Carolina in the States. And he was like, hey, this sounds cool. Like, this is like a thing I want to do too. I can actually lend out some of these pieces and we can do it here, because it doesn't make sense to mail everything to me, right? Yeah. And fly everyone over. So, I went down there, and it's just funny because like in the three figures in the forefront, the center guy leaning over, that's Zan, who owns the company. The guy behind him, King 𝔬𝐴𝐽𝐿 is his dad,
okay.
and the 𝔬𝐴𝐽𝐿 is his brother. It's just like, well, it's like
that's a nice kind of little gimmick on the side, I guess.
I know. So obviously, without him, like this would not have happened.
Yeah,
like I would have had trouble sourcing.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've wondered about. That's what I always wonder about when I see such elaborate photography projects. Like, yeah, there must be someone who's interested in kind of helping to finance a project like that.
Yeah. And the fact that, they had, just because like there were like a historical like events like / LARP company too. It's like they already had everything. We just had to customize, by painting shields and, painting flags and whatnot. So it was good.
Do the white flowers have any symbolic meaning?
Yeah, so it's just like, in like the story itself, these flowers, they grow on like the tombs of like old 𝕮𝖗𝖊𝖏 like graves and stuff. So we just wanted them in the picture to kind of allude to the story as well.
I love that because I'm looking at it now, and I didn't know that. I wasn't kind of setting you up or anything. That was because I can now, or rather I could tell before, that you've made a point of keeping them very visible without kind of being too visible, if that makes sense. Like you can tell that they're there for a reason. So I'm glad that they do have some story behind them. It's a nice little touch.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's like I don't know if you remember the scene in the Two Towers movie where like King 𝔬𝐴𝐽𝐿 is like, he's crying because, he lost. Yeah. And then you see like the little white flowers there too. I mean, that's also like an allusion to the tombs with the white petals and all that stuff.
I will definitely remember that.
So my missus is a Lord of the Rings nut. I'm going to show her this and go, tell me about this photo and see how much she knows. Little test.
Yeah.
I love that. That's like honouring the law of what you're doing. I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it was a very important story to me growing up, just reading the books and stuff. And, I appreciated the films too. They were really good. And they never had this scene really. They kind of did, but also not really. So yeah, I mean, they had like his funeral, but it a little bit changed. We won't get into it.
Yeah, I always feel like the books kind of have like an extra level of details. It's the same for me with Dune. Like, obviously, like the films and things, they have to be trimmed to a certain degree. But yeah, I can understand, like, as you're reading things through, I could see how you could have this scene in your head. And it's nice that you've put in the effort to bring that to life. Because I'm sure there'll be plenty of other diehard fans that really like resonate with this piece.
Oh, thank you. I mean, the reason, like the guy in the center, he's actually 𝐂𝐚𝐫𝐸, the character. Well, I intended for him to be 𝐂𝐚𝐫𝐸. I mean, he really loved his cousin 𝐂𝐚𝐫𝐿 as like a true brother. Like but there wasn't a lot of writing on 𝐻𝐻𝐿 as a character, since he was already dead during the time of like the Lord of the Rings. But, you know, because those two were canonically close, you can already make inferences about their life and, you know, relationships and stuff. And, you know, the last words of 𝐻𝐻𝐿 before he passed in the book was, "Let me lie here to keep the ford until 𝐂𝐚𝐫𝐿 comes," because he was protecting the ford against the forces of Isengard while he was dying and stuff. So yeah, it goes on. But so.
Could just fill one episode with you talking about Lord of the Rings lore.
Oh my gosh.
I would totally be down to just talk about games and nerd stuff like for like 5 episodes. But so like 80% of our audience wouldn't really appreciate that.
No, probably not. So yeah.
But one little note on the side: how did you like the Witcher series?
Okay, I mean, we all love Henry. He's a good Geralt. I would argue he's a little bit was. I would argue he's a little bit too handsome to be Geralt.
Really?
He's supposed to be a little bit. Geralt's supposed to be a
what a nice problem
guy.
to have.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's too handsome. So. But you know, he did a good job. I don't know. Just not even getting into the nitty-gritty of things. I think the way they laid it out was not friendly for people who were unfamiliar with the series. You know,
exactly.
they'd be left with a lot
It felt like they came in halfway through something.
Yeah.
It was like you felt like there was something missing.
Yeah, the timelines were completely messed up in the first couple of episodes. It was really hard. Even for people like me who knew the story, it was hard to kind of, make sense of the whole thing and piece the moments together. And yeah, there's a lot of other issues the series had, and it was like growing more and more. And
will either of you watch the new series with the? Fair enough. I had to ask.
I have to rant about one thing super fast about. I get so riled up, and that is in terms of the costuming department. Like, I know it's fantasy, and this kind of relates to like, you know, what I do a little bit, which is you have freedom to bend a little bit in fantasy, sure, like of course, but I think you need one foot in reality for people to believe in it. You know, like there needs to be like the what I like to say is, if you make the laws of a certain universe, like, you have to keep it consistent, you know, otherwise people can't follow along. And it lies in the costuming department. So, like, for example, Yennefer, there are scenes where she's wearing like beautiful gowns and stuff, and they are gorgeous, but the silhouettes are so contemporary that it does not even make sense. Like, of course it's fantasy, you can do what you really want, I guess, but like this, I see this gown on a red carpet maybe like 20 years ago, as opposed to pulling her from like this fairy tale, you know? And it's just these choices that ultimately affected my immersion as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's my rant.
I wouldn't have the eye for that kind of stuff, I guess. Or the knowledge.
I guess it's kind of like medieval peasants having perfect white teeth. You're like,
I mean, that is also like the typical, usual Hollywood kind of things they stumble over. Yeah. I guess that's though what people want, really, because like if you produce like a big project like that, where you speak to a gigantic fan base, but also a gigantic audience without being a fan base at the same time, like in a fan base of the whole lore. I think then I guess you have to please these kind of aspects, because, you know, like obviously there's gonna be like the beautiful actors in there and not like the half beautiful ones or like the not so beautiful ones. And I mean, I guess that's like how this whole shit really works. And I guess
it's like when they have someone super famous play like an unknown character or something, it just kind of, at least for me, just instantly pulls me out of it. Like, I know 3 or 4 other roles of this person. I think that's why I was so attached to Game of Thrones early on, because I generally, for the most part, didn't know anyone. So you can kind of, obviously, watching it, you know it's still not real, but you get that space to allow yourself to get a little bit more attached, just because you have no other reference for that face.
Yeah, true. But still, they're gonna go for the good-looking, super well-trained, demigod-like people for the roles, and not for the ones that look like you and me.
Yeah,
I guess that's not what people want to see, though.
No, but at least Cavill knew the law, and he could like fill in certain gaps and like be a perspective of someone who is not even a diehard fan, like just a general fan. He was there representing them, and for them to like mess that up, it's just, you can tell someone behind the scenes is kind of looked past their general fans, and they wanted to try and take it mainstream, which I just don't feel like it ever would.
Yeah, fair point.
It doesn't need to be.
It's always the meddling.
No, not at all.
All right, let's move on from Hollywood. Like, sometimes I wonder why Hollywood always comes up in these chats. It shouldn't have such a big part.
I think it's just, we've seen it time and time again of like, it just dilutes the creative process in anything it touches, just mainstream media generally. And I think that's probably why we're so prickly about it.
Yeah, maybe.
Because we value that kind of, the whole kind of like being in the thick of the human side of being creative. Yeah, obviously we do it full time. We need to be paid to a certain degree. That's a different conversation. But in terms of these giant production companies trying to go mainstream and make millions and have the next best thing under their belt, they just bypass a lot of, if not all of, what got them the attention in the first place. I mean,
yeah, with certain examples like Dune, like we mentioned before. I don't think that's the case there.
It's a very rare case, and it's just a perfect example of sticking to your core kind of mindset and skills of what it could actually be without like
without all the shitty unnecessary glamour. Yeah,
and I mean, just going on my other point, that there's a lot of well-known names in that film, and I still like I don't think I blinked through either film.
Yeah,
you know, and that's just kind of a testament to all the other aspects that they've paid attention to. It can be done. It's just having certain minds in play, not kind of stepping on too many toes, I guess. I don't know.
in all, whether it's Hollywood, small company, big company, it's just, you can really tell if there is genuine heart or love. Like if something is like a love letter to something, it becomes evident. And I think, unfortunately, you know, for people higher up, sometimes it's just about the cash flow.
Yeah, well, they're so out of touch, really. And I think...
Yeah, but it's the reality of this whole genre, like a lot of the times. And I guess it's not a romantic one, but it's a real one. And it's going to get worse as well when considering, the dreaded words, the whole AI stuff coming up. Also flowing into movie making, and it already does probably, and it will much more in the future, sadly. And so that brings me to a point where it's actually worth talking about this whole topic with you, Lillian, I think, because you are also quite, like, you're in an art department that will suffer immensely and already has from AI. So I wonder what's your take on this topic? Like, do you feel fearful, or do you feel that your expertise is in danger in the next 5 to 10 years, let's say?
Yeah, well, you know, not to go nitty gritty too deep because that'll take forever. I mean, for example, H&M just recently announced they were making a tool where they weren't even going to hire real models anymore. They will just purchase rights to their face and then you put it into like an AI tool and use them to model their digital clothes.
Wow.
And,
rights to their face.
It saves money.
That's ridiculous.
That sounds fucking horrible. Like, this is some really dystopian shit.
It is. And sure, I understand cutting costs. We all like to save money, true. But there comes a point where it completely stifles the need for creativity. So as a result, I think creativity is a muscle that needs to be exercised. And, you know, when people don't have to do it because they don't need to anymore, then suddenly things turn into McDonald's visually,
exactly.
right?
Oh,
Exactly. It's turning into fast food. Absolutely. That's perfect analogy.
Yeah. And for myself, it's like my personal view on AI is that it is here to stay for sure. There are ways to use it potentially that will be more ethical than others. For example, AI tools that might help you edit out pimples on a face faster, take out hairpins in a picture faster, maybe remove a car in the background faster, like that's okay. But when it comes to like generating full on images like that, it's already a very slippery slope, especially when how the images are sourced and stuff like that.
It just reminds me of that. Sorry to interrupt. It just reminds me of that quote of like, I want AI to do all the boring stuff, not the fun, creative stuff. I'm kind of winging it a little bit with that quote, but just to back up your point of like, maybe do the small kind of boring stuff a little quicker and allow more room on time for the human things.
Yeah, maybe just get a fucking AI to hoover the apartment instead.
Well, that's already a thing.
Yeah, of course, but do it properly, or like do the dishes or anything like that, or like do the UV unwrapping as a 3D artist. You guys don't know what that means, but it's a really shitty kind of process to be able to texture a 3D model. In order to do that, you have to unwrap it, meaning you have to you have to cut the model into different pieces, like the surface of the model, and in order for the textures to be projected on there properly. And this is such a tedious process, and I'm still waiting for an actual kind of AI software that can actually do a really, really good job out of that. And I mean, obviously there are tools to automate it, but it's never perfect. And that kind of stuff, it always, like, it takes a lot of time for these kind of things to emerge, it seems, while on the other hand, there's full-on 3D model generator pages already.
I was just going to say they're putting more effort into the creating more mainstream shortcuts, I think, rather than the useful shortcuts.
Yeah, because
like
there is no
yourself.
glory for them in there. There is no artistic glory to be able to say from your own point of view, like, I kind of make something or help making something creative, like create something, instead of I made a tool that helps creative people in their process. No one cares about that if you say it like that. But if you can say like, I'm the guy who made an AI page that lets people generate their own 3D models. I mean, obviously you get a ton of haters, but also a lot of people will love you for it. And that's kind of the reason, I guess, why a lot of these AI developments go into the more creative directions and instead of the more tedious ones, because there's no glory in that.
Yeah. And I think just in this day and age, it has become more and more vital for me to photograph and document all steps of my work, because even in like the recent years, ever since AI became a thing, I've always had people ask me, is this AI? Or I had my work up in an exhibition once and people were there attending and they were like, wow, so this is your AI like art? And I'm like, no, absolutely
what
not.
An insult.
That is so insulting, though.
I know. They're like, are you an AI artist? I'm like, no, right? Or people being like, yeah, this is cool, but I can just do this I can get the same results with AI, right? I don't need to pay you for this. So I actually feel the financial burden of this. A lot of clients that might have paid a lot more before, they might write me and then say, hey, I'm so sorry. The finance department axed our budget. They want us to automate or use AI for some things. So we can only offer to pay you this much, or we can't pay you anymore because we can't, right? So people just want a product necessarily. They don't really care about quality control sometimes, or they don't care about the ethics behind it.
And that goes into art even. Like, a lot of people already don't care anymore if it's AI made what they're looking at, or if it's an actual person who did it.
Same with music and the album covers and everything like that. It's only a matter of time before the production becomes more common of being AI generated.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the question is, obviously AI has to learn from something. And it's just too big of a database online for it to pick from. Like, how do you even consent to that? You don't. So pretty much,
I recently heard.
It's just a lot.
I recently heard or saw this quote from some AI platform developer guy, whoever the fuck he is. I don't give a shit really, but he said one thing when asked about the ethics behind the AI usage, and he said something in the way of. It would kill the AI industry if we would have to get permission from all the artists. So, yeah, there you go. There you have it. That's all you need to know about it.
Exactly. And then just on the same topic, I know Adobe has Firefly, which is their AI thing. And here's the funny thing, because the fine print is that they say, oh, we actually train Firefly on our stock image thing. But one, that's why Firefly is not nearly, I think, as good as something like Midjourney, because there's limited things to train on. And two, it's like I think apparently it wasn't just like stock that it was training on too. Like there have been some pushback, I think, with people who might have uploaded to like some of these legal stock sites. Yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah, I heard about that too, and I also was kind of disgusted about it.
It's never going to be straightforward, is it?
There's already enough reasons to be disgusted at Adobe.
They give me some work, so
you can't say anything bad about them. You can do it after the podcast.
Fair enough. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, this is like a reality we do live in. I'm not saying that we shouldn't go and understand what these new tools are and their capabilities, because I think in a way it is important that we understand how the landscape changes around us in order to stay relevant. But overall, it is more so already, even in this infancy of this whole AI thing, the financial strain on artists who have commissions and stuff is already evident. And it's kind of devalued a lot of work. I mean, human-made work is probably going to be even more of a luxury item now, but limited to like people who can afford it then, right? So
yeah, I mean, it's a pretty dire view on the whole development.
I honestly believe it's going to split people into two groups, or maybe even, I may have said this before, but I feel like there's going to be probably three groups generally. There's going to be 100% pro AI, not giving a shit about quality, they just want the product. There's going to be a middle group that couldn't care less either way, just give me the thing, whatever it is. And then I feel like there's going to be a group that are probably already, let's call them traditionalists, but their stance on that, I would hope, is going to be strengthened. They're going to kind of push back even more. And I think for the various creatives in whatever medium or profession they're in are going to kind of find their way within that, and depending on how they manage their process and how they want to manage their career and their ethical choices and their decisions, it's going to kind of separate certain people into certain groups, which doesn't sound nice, but I feel like we're already seeing it in terms of the opinions that we're seeing online. And that's why I'm not too concerned at the minute. Obviously I am against how it's set up, but in terms of like strengthening the want for traditional human-made work, and I say traditional in like quite a modern sense, ironically, as in like the work that you do, Chris, it's still handmade, even though it's using modern technology. I'm very much including that. Not quite the caveman pen and pencil like myself, not just them. So I'm kind of trying to find some optimism in it, as well as, being very aware of the negatives.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of some positives, and unfortunately, they're all not art related, such as, examples of very recently this year when, AI helped a paralyzed man walk again.
Yeah, for sure.
It helped increase the, accuracy of like cancer cell detection, like, really early and all that stuff. So, they're like all these good pieces, like feel-good pieces, are not art related. So I don't know.
No, it's a tool that can be used well, absolutely. But that by proxy means it can be misused. Sense. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, of course, it can be used. It could be used, as I said before, to help with the more tedious aspects, with the more kind of the raw, shitty work that no one really wants to do. And of course, you could argue that this is actually a vital part of being an artist, because the labor kind of makes the reward bigger, or like there's a lot of different aspects you could put into that. But at the end of the day, I would be glad if I would have like a couple of tools that would make certain processes of my work a little bit easier, where I can just focus more on the actual creative bits and less on the shitty, like 2 hours work that doesn't do anything creative at all.
Yeah. And also, just as like another note, I was offered, to like a very generous sum of money to promote AI software.
Wow.
And a part of me was like, I can't do this, because it's like, one, why am I promoting something that is ultimately trying to replace, everyone,
and especially your
and
work.
Yeah. And then I was like, this is going to alienate everyone that, might be interested in my work to begin with, so I was like, oh, I like that. I like the cash that you're offering, but I can't, so.
Just put on an alter ego and put on like a face mask or something.
Oh gosh, yeah. But, a tool is a tool, I guess, but I think this is just something that artists face in all cycles, like, the advent of Photoshop, right? The advent of the camera and stuff, just changing the game. And this thing is suddenly very left field with its own very unique circumstances. But I think every generation has its own reckoning moment, right?
Yeah, true. But also it's never been that kind of a gigantic revolution in such a short period of time.
I don't think it's been as blatantly plagiarizing either.
Yeah, sure.
Yes,
that's the difference.
True. Mm-hmm.
And actually being able to do it on its own, like the human aspect isn't necessary anymore at all. Like you could easily just automate something like 𝔕𝖗𝔓𝑚 to make its own stuff, whatever it.
Because even with the camera, you had to learn how to use it. Even with Photoshop, you still have to learn how to use it. Yeah, it's not a simple thing.
All of these processes are pretty much gone. And then there's the people who would argue, but a good prompt isn't just like, you can't just put anything down and expect it to be coming out really well. Well, I don't care, because as said, it could also do it on its own without anyone putting any prompts in. So yeah, it kind of.
Well, surely by that idea, you could type in, create me a piece of art that is made by a professional prompt artist, and then it could just do whatever it wanted. Surely you can kind of bypass even the initial prompt.
Yeah, or you can just go into like 𝔕𝖗𝔓𝑚, I think, has a feed of like the highlights of the day.
Ugh.
And you can just go in there and copy paste any prompts of all these pieces in there. And yeah, I mean, there's
I just laugh at people.
There's really nothing to it. Everybody can do it in a matter of a second. There is no value in that. No artistic value, certainly.
I know there's people who are protective of their prompts. Like, you copy me.
Yeah, that is so absurd. That is so absurd.
I was like, well, yeah, I think there's like a many layers of irony to that, and it's almost hilarious. Almost hilarious, if not for just
the people who use this stuff, who actually think they own what they, let's call it, create, for the lack of a better word. They own a copyright to that. It's so absurd and it's so hilarious. Yeah.
No, so I'm just laughing at it.
So I have one more or one last question, just changing the subject ever so slightly. So I find, just kind of coming from a personal point of view, I find myself looking forward to projects that I would love to try, or ideas I'd love to try when time allows. How how forward do you kind of think in terms of projects and then time planning? And obviously with your teaching job as well, that must kind of limit certain windows of time for you to either pick up projects that you spoke about with models or anything like that. So how far forward do you generally plan for projects?
Well, this is interesting because sometimes I have like dream ideas that I might just jot down, and I don't even get to them for years, right? But most of the time, if I want or need to get something done, I like to pre-plan things at least a few months in advance, so any moving parts have time to, arrive at my doorstep, and stuff. And I have time to actually set down a location and whatever. It doesn't need to be much more than that. Sometimes the best shoots are last minute, but I would say maybe a few months.
Yeah. No, the only reason I ask is because I think, like Chris mentioned earlier, like I've always appreciated photography in various forms, but I'm quite naive in terms of what goes into it. So I'd like to know each individual's kind of process of laying these things out. That's all. But I suppose you can definitely think too far ahead, because then you're kind of not really concentrating on current projects too much, I guess.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when you think too far ahead, it's like there's only so much you can do before you actually do the shoot and then edit, right? So you can think as much as you want, and it's really not going to change the final result.
Over planning doesn't really work. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So I try not to get too wrapped in that pre-production aspect. I do it and it's done, and we kind of let it sink for a little bit,
Yeah. All right, then let's have like one last point from my side as well, and then it might be time to end it. I was just wondering, looking at your page again, here and there's like animals that you shoot with. Is there, like, to end on a maybe more of a fun note, is there like any fun story that ever happened to you while shooting with animals?
Oh, yeah. I mean, animals they have a mind of their own,
Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting bit about the question, I think, like, because obviously every model you can kind of control where they stand and what they do, how they look like, and you can give them commands and you can guide them. An animal, I mean, maybe there's a trainer coming with the animal, depending on what it is, but there is very little you can actually control. So I guess that gives it a bit more of a different dynamic, like a bit more of a spontaneous kind of thing, and just go with the flow and see what the result's going to be like.
Yeah, because, animals they're either on or they're off, like you can't really, if they're not in the mood, they can't, And the funny thing is that, they have such keen senses, raptors, owls, hawks, and all that stuff. So they're usually hyperfixated on something we can't hear. So the way I work, or what happens on a shoot, is like the model is ready and she just has to stay there for like 10 minutes, not moving, while there's like a dog and pony show happening around trying to like get this bird's attention. And then right when it turns, you gotta bam, just take it. And, funny enough, it was the hardest bird we've ever had to work with was like just an owl. Like she just refused to look straight because there was something that we didn't know that was happening back there. So most shots were just the back of her head. I worked with wolves actually, and those pictures aren't
nice.
Yeah, and those wolves are difficult as well because they're very cat-like actually in a way. And sure, you can have treats on hand and all that stuff, but ultimately it's your job to stay still. They will do what they want around you, and if it happens, it happens. They're not like dogs where you can tell them to sit.
Squeaky toys won't work, I'm guessing.
No, I mean, you can have treats. Yeah. But even then, like the treats, some of them have enough dignity to like just turn down the treats, and they're like, what are you asking
That's
of
my
me?
dog.
They don't want
I absolutely can relate to that,
Yeah. And so like you can really tell who the glutton wolves are when they're just like hee and they'll just come and like do anything for treats, and the ones that are always really standoffish, and then they refuse to get too close to you and they're really skittish and stuff. So yeah, it's just a game of hurry up and wait with most creatures.
Kind of a similar dynamic like with the weather, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. So this is why I have a love-hate relationship with shooting outdoors. You need to be, it's a lot more effort than shooting in a studio setup, that's for sure.
I'm guessing you've not shot much in the UK then.
Well, funny enough, I actually started my whole photography journey like mainly in the UK when I was still living there. And so, I mean, the good thing about that is I was connected to so many brilliant like visual like designers and artists to work with and collaborate with. The bad news is I'm across the ocean now, so it's hard.
Right. Yeah, I just mean reliability with the weather.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we didn't shoot outside much for a reason. So, but UK is definitely near and dear to my heart. A lot of growing pains there, a lot of roots set there, and definitely a part of who I am today.
Nice.
So
yeah, because there's a lot of like historic locations and things over here as well that I would imagine would be quite useful.
Yeah, for sure. It's just a it's very conducive to that sort of line of thinking. It's not like Canada where everything's so young, you know, it's very young.
But you still travel a lot, right? Like you still do these trips where you do like a whole kind of Europe trip and plan like, I don't know, 5 to 10 different shoots or something in all the different countries.
Yeah, the timing's a bit more limited now, so not as frequent as before, but definitely at least once a year or something. Sometimes it's music related, and then I'll just decide to shoehorn in shoots at the same time just to be pragmatic.
Nice.
So, next time you're around, let me know. Like if you're in the area.
I want some cheese.
Sorry?
And cheese fondue. I want some cheese fondue.
Actually, we've had that beer fondue back then in Basel.
I love that. It was so good.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Sadly, that place had to close down during COVID. That was a really, really big loss for the city.
That's a tragedy, I'm just saying.
Absolutely.
So have you guys collaborated on a photography project with the band yet?
Well, I mean, we did a quick shoot.
Not formally, I would say, though, right?
Because just a little bit of background before we end this. Lillian did some piano recordings for the Hearts of No Light album for Schammasch back in 2019. And for that, she came to Switzerland on one of her trips. And yeah, we did a quick, you were here for like 2 days or so, I think. And yeah, we did just a quick shoot in the rehearsal room. I mean, yeah, it was all right for the circumstances. The results were really good, but it wasn't something that we put out in kind of like under a project or anything. It was just like a more spontaneous thing.
Sure. So the piano collaboration, Chris, you were explaining to me how like certain things that happened with that. Would you want to share a little bit on here in terms of like the couple of takes that you did?
Yeah, I mean, that was quite magical to me actually, because you did the perfect thing, that exact thing I really had in mind, like this whole intro for the album, this whole piece. That I think that was really just one take, and I'm pretty sure it was one whole take that I just overtook without any kind of editing or anything. And I think we did like 5 different takes of that kind of idea. And the idea was basically just do like kind of a dramatic 1 to 2 minute piece in the Chopin kind of style. And you nailed it. Absolutely. Like it was mind blowing and I was extremely happy. So yes, still absolutely love that piece. And it's been our live intro for the shows for like 5 years after that until now. So yeah.
Thank you. I mean, there's a part of me that loves improv in music, simply because of the no restriction thing, right? It is very liberating, and just kind of channeling what I call, again, the whole divine madness thing through you.
That's actually an interesting kind of way of terming it. Like, I know exactly what you mean by that term. and I might just steal that.
Go ahead. Yeah. There's no better way to
Yeah.
say it, you know? And in a way, I find that the improv thing is what keeps me sane sometimes. But even just musically tying that in sound and visual arts, the one thing that ties them together is color, because sonically, the different color tones in your sound create, depth in the listening experience. And I know that sounds really abstract, but it is something that I really, really subscribe to. And then when I first started shooting, that was kind of what I was trying to convey in my photographs, being like, hey, I'm always dealing with color all the time in a metaphorical way. Let's do it literally. So just a little tidbit.
It's a really nice way of looking at it. Yeah, I worked recently with a musician who goes by 𝐂𝐴, and he hears music in colour as well. And he was explaining some of his perspective, and it's amazing to hear.
Yeah, there is a term for that, actually.
There is, and I can't bring it.
Synesthesia.
That's the one. Yeah. It's an amazing concept. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not like, I don't have like literal like synesthesia like episodes necessarily to that degree. Like I know somebody, the opening chord of one symphony, he just saw a burger because he sees like, brown, green, red, and yellow.
Or was he hungry at the time of writing it?
Yeah, probably. But it's like, sounds like, oh, this muted, melody. Like if I play this on this string as opposed to this string, this brighter tonal quality, the colors are shimmery as opposed to like a deep like residue, right? And then some of that sort of expressive quality, I think is vital for like a creative, fun listening experience. And visually, I think just the different levels and stuff of colors that the human eye registers is just something I'm really obsessed with.
I always get shit from my band members when they have to learn my guitar lines, and certain riffs I write in a specific way, like with specific strings played, because exactly of the reason that you just explained, because they have a different tone to it, a different sound color. And then they sometimes will give me shit because it would be easier to play it on another string that is closer to the finger. And then sometimes it's a discussion of if it's fine to play this particular riff on that one other string, because in the end, no one's going to hear it when you play it live, of course. But on the recording, obviously, it can make quite a big difference.
Yeah, I think recording picks up everything. Yeah. So everything you put on there is deliberate, And I think, I don't know, like some people who listen to music, they're like, oh, I'm uneducated or whatever. I can't tell. I don't understand it. It just sounds good to me. Like, some people do say that. But I think people subconsciously gravitate towards things. Yeah. Because like you just innately pick up on like the emotion or something of a song. And a lot of the time it's because of these unwritten elements, And I think the same thing goes with visual art that uses a lot of color. I think there's something to it.
Yeah, it's super interesting to hear you talk about it, because it's very obvious that color for you is a very elementary form of expression and a very important tool for your work. But hearing you talk about it opens up kind of a broader understanding of how you use color, especially if you also bring it into the music, which is a very kind of enlightening to hear.
Yeah,
I never thought about it. Yeah. Sorry, I never thought about it that way in terms of color tones, like in this kind of specific way. To me, it's always kind of an instinctive thing that just happens because my instincts tell me to go this way or the other way, but I've never really consciously thought about it like that.
Yeah, well, your instinct is telling you that, oh, this resonates with what you're trying to express more because it inherently sounds different. But yeah, growing up, just even as a child, I just had this whole color thing hammered into my brain by my teachers and stuff. And, they're fantastic musicians, and, it was so vital to them that these very simple lines were brought to life through attack, which was, how a sound is, you know, hit initially, attack, and then how it decays and how you can like continue lines like this. And, you know, how can you make that line continue artificially, and the different ways of how brightly you can play something or something like that. And I don't know, I think these people, or these composers, when they're writing stuff, they were in turn very much inspired by like paintings, because a lot of their works were inspired by, you know, things that they were seeing in front of them, and they would do like sonic representations. So there's a little bit of hand-holding, I think, here between the two. So
I feel like it's kind of related to how humans use voice as well. Obviously, you want to be calm and quiet and relaxed. You generally speak softer and quieter. If you want to make a point and put some feeling behind your words, you generally get louder, or, you know, kind of a little bit more raspy or anything like that. And it's that form of expression, I think, that even though, you're creating it with your hands through music, it's still quite a similar way of communicating. And like you say, like people picking up on that from an instinctive point of view, even if they don't know the techniques that are used or the thoughts behind it, there's something quite primal in there in terms of how we're communicating it.
That's the proper word, primal. I also just thought of that.
Yeah.
And I think I've mentioned in one of the other episodes as well, like that's one of the big reasons for the beauty of art, that it's this universal kind of language that just pervades everything. Like, no matter what kind of art we're talking about, there's always the same kind of similarities in how it works and how creation is done. You can always find these little bit of similarities in all kind of different departments of art.
Indeed.
Yeah. It's just everyone influences each other. And, you know, I think there's a big beauty in that for sure. I just always remember as a kid, though, like when it came to visual stuff, there was just something special about being able to hold a piece of art, you know, when you print it out or something. And that was kind of what made it such a special medium for me. Like, of course, music is surrounding you and it's creating ambience and stuff, but, you know, just like physically holding something, you know, that's what still draws me to it to this day. So.
All right. I think that's a good note to end it here. We've already been near to the 2 hours mark, but I could go on for like another 4 hours easily.
Yeah, I feel like we could get more into the kind of the human details of things, but no, we appreciate your time, Lillian, and it's been an absolute pleasure to get into the details of your work and your process and your whys and your hows. And I think there's a lot to be learned from talking about these things, and it's nice to get different perspectives from different mediums as well. So we're very grateful for that.
Oh, thank you for having me. And, you know, obviously I admire both of your work very much.
Thank you.
And it's just like a really nice way to streamline my thought. So you guys have been wonderful hosts. Thank you
very much. I think at some point you have to come back, actually. This has been too interesting to not do it again.
Well, I mean, I won't have time in July. Maybe in November.
I mean,
we'll see.
It doesn't have to be this year, but at some point again. If we're still doing it by the next year.
Of course.
Well, thank you again for gracing us with your presence, and good luck on all your future endeavors.
And
you have a great day.
Thank you so much. Same to both of you.
Thank you, Lillian.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Take care.